image.
Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 special. I'm Shereen, Bhan, and we're at the BrandZ Top 50 Most Valuable Brands of India. We're back here once again to have a conversation about what it will take to get brands to survive in a market where consumers are much more empowered on account of technology. I've got my dirty dozen here, some of the best brands in the country joining us here on this special show. Sunil Sood, the CEO of Vodafone; Vivek Gambhir, the CEO of Godrej Consumer Products; Ranjit Chani, the Managing Director of Novartis; Anupam Mittal, the CEO of People Interactive; Hemant Malik, the Divisional Chief Executive at ITC; Manoj Kumar, the Managing Director at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare; Suresh Narayanan, the Managing Director at Nestle; Rudratej Singh, the President at Royal Enfield; Samir Singh, the ED at HUL; Abhijit Roy, the Managing Director and CEO of Berger Paints; and David Roth at WPP. Since we're talking about dealing with building brands in an era where the consumer is empowered, I thought it would be best to actually bring you the hypothesis that's been floated by John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple and Pepsi, in his book Moonshot. And Moonshot is a Silicon Valley term for how the competitive landscape is actually reset by a seminal event or a seminal innovation. In that book, he says, the biggest moonshot in years is happening right now. Dramatic shift from producers being in control to customers being in control. It's being propelled by a tsunami of exponentially expanding technologies never been seen before, causing the economic power to shift from business producers to increasingly smart and smarter customers. This time, the customer will be in control, and those who fail to grasp what's happening will miss the future. So let me start by getting your comments on that very important hypothesis. And Suresh Narayan, Nestle, let me ask you, is the consumer really in control today?
Well, if you look at it very simply from a couple of statistics, I think it establishes that in India you have a 90% penetration of mobile phones. 70% of people who are viewing the internet are doing through mobile phones. And I think the entire, and if you look at television, for example, has got a 60% reach. So therefore, it's very clear that going forward, the medium of the mobile, the medium of the internet, the medium of digital is very clearly taking the conversation away from brand marketers to the consumer who decides what the conversation should be.
Sunil Sood, let me ask you this. How has this changed what you're doing, for instance, at Vodafone? The advent of an adaptive middle class, the advent of the adaptive millennial generation, a more empowered consumer. How are you dealing with it, for instance?
Firstly, we are facilitating that, and I'm very happy that he mentioned, because
when the calls are not dropping, you mean?
Yes. All this is thanks to the mobile industry, and in that sense, the mobile industry has been the poster boy of social change, including what India is becoming. So we are very much in the thick of this brand change, and we are very much in the thick of the social change which is happening at the consumer side. Yes, the connected world is increasing on a daily basis, but to say that it is cross India and that television is no more relevant, I would hesitate.
No, I'm not saying it's not relevant now, but I'm saying in the next 5 years, for instance. It's
still a far more urban. You got, the top 30% of the mobile industry is now currently on the digital data journey. But there's still 70% to go, and that's more in the rural belt and in the mid-level Indian towns. So, if you're looking at the ones which are the first entrance into change, and is the middle class part of it? Yes, it is, but far more in the urban side. In the rural belt, things are a little slower, but they are moving very fast.
So, how is this empowered consumer today forcing brands like yours to change?
Very simply, earlier the communication was one way. I advertise on TV or I put my ad on the newspaper. The guy had no way to respond to that. At the very best, he could write me a letter or write me an email, and that's how he would connect back with me. Today, through social media, etc., he's empowered. He can generate crowds. He can generate opinions. And that's what is causing the difference.
He can take you down in a couple of minutes if he wants.
Yes, and one has to be careful on that area, and one has to watch out that we are delivering what we promise. And that's very, very important, because he can question you in a second and he can gather a crowd in a second. And that's a very important part of the change.
How concerned, is that your nightmare? Is that your number one concern today?
No, not really, but it's definitely something you've got to be very, very conscious of. So you
Shereen,
have to ensure delivery.
I want to get you in on this because you're living through that nightmare today, aren't you? I mean, you spent decades building a brand in this country, and in a matter of days, that brand was brought to its knees. You're living through this nightmare.
Well, I think in a sense, you're right, Shereen, that, and I think the comment that was being made that the conversation changes very quickly, and it can move from very positive to extremely negative, also in a matter of seconds and if not in a matter of days. Surely that is the reality that we are living in. But I would also take it as a huge opportunity. I think what's happened to us is something that makes all brands vulnerable in some sense or the other. And fine, we have our learnings from it as an organization. But going forward, I think there is a huge opportunity in engaging in that conversation in a constructive, empathetic, and in a positive manner. And that's what I take out as an organization coming out of this crisis, hopefully, relatively soon.
Okay, let me shift and talk about some of the other issues that this conversation is throwing up at this point in time. And this really is, and Samir, I'll get you to comment, and then I'll bring the gentleman from the other side into the conversation as well. Take us through what kind of customer plans, for instance, organizations like yours are now being compelled to look at.
I think, let me try and answer that question in a slightly different way, which is, I think, still more relevant to our organization. I think the first thing is traditional advertising or traditional marketing. It's just a pejorative term for something that will not die for the next 15 years. In India, it is very, very relevant, and it's all about having differentiated propositions, great brands, great insights. That, whether you are communicating to her on digital or with a customer plan, so I think
the medium is, you're saying, irrelevant
and
for
therefore
now.
Even television and exactly the kind of thinking that has held us in good stead will stay relevant for the next 15 years. Now, when it comes to digital, I think, like Suresh said, I actually see it as a huge opportunity. I'm not sort of dying every day, sleepless nights, thinking who's going to sort of find the weak link in my brand. There will be weak links.
Despite videos going viral.
Despite songs going viral. I'm really seeing this as a huge opportunity. There are lots of new indicators and benchmarks that come in. So I think traditionally for us, HUL, we look at what's happening to brand attributes, brand equity apart from market share. But now we are looking at how many people are going online, how much are they buying from our sort of e-com websites, how much are they engaging with this app. And that's creating a whole new world of opportunity for us.
How are you assimilating the feedback that you're now getting from an empowered customer into what the brand is standing for, what you want to do in terms of creating new categories? And Mr. Shani, maybe we can start by asking you, even though, in terms of innovation, you require hundreds and millions of dollars as far as the pharma industry is concerned. Billions, absolutely. So, in your case, perhaps that's not such a relevant question, but addressing different pain points is. But how are you looking at brand creation and linking innovation with it?
Well, it's true because it is already a digitally empowered customer or patient. And as far as pharma companies are concerned, clearly ethical pharma we cannot advertise, but we can certainly talk about disease patterns and how to manage those diseases. So pharma companies are also using this medium because people are not communicating on this medium, they're living their lives on this medium. So there's so much exchange of information and insights which you draw from this platform. And as far as brands are concerned, brand is a promise and reputation is delivery of their promise over and over again. So if people relate diseases, cures and brands, then you've got a business going. So pharma companies are also becoming extremely patient-centric now and using this platform very effectively.
But what are the challenges of addressing brands in an era of what some would say is regulatory uncertainty?
I think if you look at and our company has many kind of categories, and some of them are way more regulated, like the tobacco category, and some of the others, like now we are pretty serious players in food, and we have seen something recently happening as far as that area is concerned. But I think, it's a question in terms of how prepared you are. Because if you try to have, first of all, are you sure that your product is all right? And I think our own experience has been in this episode that we have been able to come all right, and our products have been available despite these 700 or 1500 tests that got carried out. And for that, what is the kind of supply chain, what is the kind of quality control system that you have has been pretty important for us. And that
so
is
somebody's pain has been an opportunity for you? At least your advertising would seem to suggest that.
I think what we are trying to do is to tell the consumer that you can trust our brands because they have been through, very stringent quality protocol and processes, which we actually believe in, and which also comes in from the kind of supply chain that you go in. So ITCs, you wanting to say something?
No, I was just saying, while it may be clever on your part, but don't you believe that, in a sense, it brings down the brand value of the category?
I think the brand value of the category has got affected. And I think, and this is something...
And this won't further impact it?
No, I don't think it will further impact this because I think it is also kind of a wake-up call. We can argue about why are the regulations not correct and we can try to change the regulations. But if the regulations exist, then you have to make sure that you are following the regulations. And I think this also showed that a lot of communication was required because there had been different understanding. And I think your ability to go and actually communicate also made a lot of difference.
Suresh, I am going to get you to comment on this. You know, we're talking about regulations and the uncertainty caused by over-regulation, perhaps, or some would argue over-regulation. But respond to that. We're talking about the empowered consumer. But what about the competitor? What about the competitive landscape and how aggressively that is now impacting the way that that brands evolve in a market like this?
Sure. To me, in my own lexicon, competitors energize. Competitors don't intimidate. And I think the company like Nestle, for whom quality has meant trust for 150 years, who are a food and beverage company, that's all we make. And that's what we make across countries. I think for us, it is our strong suit to be talking about quality. Now, obviously, when the key brand in a category gets affected, in simple marketing terms, and I've been in marketing long enough to understand that the category does get pulled down. There's no two ways about it. I think we can look at any metrics, and there's no way in which the category can sustain itself if the market leader by far gets an adverse impact. Now, the issue in this environment and the issue of contention that Nestle has had has not been with the regulatory standard. So there's no question. We are not sitting here and talking about not the primacy of the FSSAI.
Sure.
Of course, they are the most important authority. We respect it, we regard it, and we have not got any issues as far as their credibility and their credentials are concerned. All that we're talking about is that there is an infrastructure to do a testing of the kind that we're talking about. We're talking about a certain set of protocols, and we're talking about a certain set of human skills and practices that needs to go to in order to ensure that the system is fair, transparent, clear, and discernible of clear actions to be taken. That's all that is being talked of at this stage. And I think the fact of the matter is that Nestle as a company, the backbone of this company is quality. I don't think we need to shout from the rooftops saying what we stand for as a company. We have stood for quality for 103 years, and we'll continue to stand for quality for I don't know how many more 100 years in this country.
Sunil, let me ask you this, because the entire telecom industry is faced with this problem at this point in time. The telecom regulator is saying that you must compensate customers for call drops. We don't care how you do it. We don't care whether you invest more in infrastructure, increase your network capacities, but at the end of the day, you have promised consumers a certain quality of service and you're not delivering on that, and hence you must compensate. What does that do to a brand?
Well, firstly, the regulator has taken out a consultation paper on this. He has not said anything.
He has said it. 24 hours ago on CNBC-TV18, he has very unequivocally and categorically stated that telecom companies must compensate consumers.
Right, but there is a discussion paper on this, and the discussion paper will have every section of society coming and giving their views on this. So let's wait for that, and that will
But the larger impact on the brand.
But I'm just trying to say, I mean, coming back to the arguments that we're having, see, ultimately, it's not just about regulatory, and I agree with him that nobody is trying to challenge any regulatory authority. It's about regulatory clarity. And sometimes the rules are not absolutely clear. They're not black and white. There's a lot of gray in our rules. And then it is open to interpretation, and open to interpretation at any level. And there's not much maturity. There can be a lot of immaturity, and that in the level of interpretation you have. And that's what could affect and damage good brands also.
Let's move on and talk about the empowered customer also being an influencer, and that's exactly what you're seeing happen. Vivek Gambhir, let me get you to respond to that. How are you dealing with the fact that the consumer is now actually influencing other consumers? You can get price information, you can get reviews, you can get product reviews, and all kinds of things available now, which are consumers telling other consumers what they ought to buy, where they should eat, what they should do, how they should spend their money. How is that impacting brands like yours?
You know, the first thing we learn in marketing is that the consumer is king. So this is nothing new. Then we learn that the consumer is queen. And then we learn that the consumer is a prince or a princess. So in all of marketing's objectives have always been to satisfy the needs of consumers.
Yeah.
What's been happening is because of technology and because of the prevalence of multiple channels, I think the balance of power is shifting a little bit to the consumer.
Little bit or a lot?
It's an evolutionary process, and it probably might happen a lot quicker than what we think it would happen. Traditionally, marketing is sat on a pulpit.
So you're not thinking it will take a 15-year transition period, or you think
I
it will happen a lot
think these
sooner?
kinds of changes, because of what's called the network effect, tend to happen much more quicker than what we would think to. Typically, marketing is sat on a pulpit and preached to consumers. I think what's now happening is that marketing has to figure out how to be part of consumer conversations. The reality still is that if you go and look at data on social media, most conversations happen without brands being part of it. So the key for a brand is to figure out how to infuse itself into a conversation while being authentic.
Okay.
And that is the fundamental challenge that marketers will face, is how do we make consumers talk about us as opposed to us talking about our own brands. And that's a fundamental shift that's going to happen. Consumers are increasingly becoming more of advocates. So we have to be authentic. But as long as we deliver the right propositions, as long as we create products and services that our consumers love and delight, it will happen automatically.
Of course, I mean, the differentiation, innovation, all of that, is a given. But let me bring the two gentlemen here, and let me start with you, Anupam, about this point about consumers now becoming advocates, consumers becoming influencers, of course, aligned with the fact that you now have technology to disseminate that kind of opinion. What does it mean for a brand like yours? How are you engaging with the consumer?
I think it's a very interesting question, and something that we all are really grappling with, as opposed to fully understanding as yet. But the fact is that we have built our brands on the digital medium and then gone into sort of what we call mainstream media or traditional media. So for us, it's always been about having conversations with consumers or trying to understand sort of the things or the issues that affect them and building conversations around them. So I'll give you one example. So one of our brands called Shaadi.com, we usually, when you look at our social conversations, and we thought a lot about this, we said, look, this is a very culturally relevant topic. This is something that is, people hold on to a lot of cultural or traditional values. How do we start engaging people by saying, look, a digital medium can somehow disrupt the old ways these things are done? And what we came up was that there's a lot of ills around the institution of marriage as well. And we felt it was very contextual to then build a lot of conversation around that. So whether it's anti-dowry or whether it's domestic violence, and we built a whole sort of movement, if you will, and that's what we call it internally, towards enabling those conversations. And that was a win-win-win. We're actually doing something about it in society. We now have, large followings on these digital platforms, which are primarily women and which are a target customer group for us, who not only follow these conversations, but actually initiate a lot of these conversations. So I think to start to think of businesses beyond just that product that you're selling, and things that might be affiliated in that particular area, whether or not it impacts your product directly, is something that plays out in the longer term. So we never actually on social media talk about our product, but actually have conversations around it.
Abhijit, I want to bring you in on this conversation to take that point forward. And we're seeing a lot of brands do this, reaching out to an empowered consumer and trying to empower them further. So the efforts of Tanishq, for instance, to do with second marriages in India, to talk about social issues in India, change perceptions in India, about the housewife, for instance. Do you believe that this is now the next level of communication, the next level as far as brand strategy is concerned?
Yeah, I think, that's a very relevant point which you brought out, because basically what we were doing earlier was, selling the products, branding it and trying to, sell it to the consumers. Now,
are brands now trying to take the high moral ground?
Not really, but yes, it's changing
and there's
a bit.
nothing wrong with that.
No, that's fine, but what I'm trying to say is, you need to innovate a little bit to give, better services to the company, not to the customers also. What's going on, if you look at in the painting process, for example, I'm just giving you a small example and the changes that are happening there. Earlier we were selling brands like, Easy Clean, All Guard in our case, so there are different brands like that. But if you ask a consumer what is it that is bothering them in the painting process, they will never talk about these brands. They will talk that, it is very dusty, it's a mess, it takes a long time to do the painting process. I tend to postpone this job. So if you analyze the problems, it is quite different from what the brands are doing in terms of a solution. So what we thought of is we will launch, something called an express painting service, whereby, we bring in automatic machines, where, if you apply it on the wall, it sucks off the dust automatically.
Okay.
And you can paint it, with a roller which is very automatic. It reduces the time by about 40%. We set up 20 training centers across the country. We are training 10,000 plus painters on this. And we are advertising, we did this, as a trial launch in Kerala and West Bengal. We got extremely overwhelming response actually. And now we are going to roll it out across the country from the 1st of October. So what we are trying to do is actually give a solution to consumers of their real problems, not something which is an imagined thing, trying to fight on brand attributes and, which is important, which continues. And I think, I agree with Mr. Zood that, this part of the business will continue across India for quite some time now. Television will retain its importance, but we need to innovate in order to give something better to the consumer.
Right. Rudratej, let me ask you this. You're dealing with an iconic brand, but you're dealing with a new customer. As I pointed out, and Scully calls them the adaptive millennial, access to technology. He says they don't like to buy, they like to rent, hence the Uber economy and so on and so forth. How are you dealing with the insights that you're picking up from the market and adapting? Because not adapting was a big challenge for Royal Enfield, almost took you down. And the fact that you've now resurrected yourself is on account of being able to stay relevant to today's customer.
As you rightly said, Royal Enfield is a very different brand to the ones that we've talked about till now. One of the big differences that I would say fundamentally is the fact that our brand managers are sitting not in boardrooms, but they're sitting outside. They're using the brand. And what that really means is, and I really want to segue into one observation, is that the fact is that we still call people consumers. There's a certain transactional expectation we have from people. We reach out to them in a reach into frequency mechanism. We have a story to tell, and we expect them to consume. The fact of the matter is what we get back, the balance that you were talking about, that's sort of changing, is because there are people talking back to us, not consumers. And that's what we see, which we loosely talk about as word of mouth or influence. It's people talking about living the story. So there's a big shift between manufacturers and brands wanting to tell a story, and there are people living a story. For Royal Enfield in particular, what's happened in the last 5 years fundamentally is that we have become a brand that has balanced aspiration and access. It's very rare for a brand to be able to be aspirational and accessible. This sweet spot for me, and if I were to put a formula, is what makes
I would imagine for everybody sitting in this room,
Yeah, so that for me is what makes a mass brand an iconic brand, or a brand that's accessible, still aspirational. That's a tightrope which very few brands can command, and that's the tightrope that we want to continue to walk. Our GRPs are bikes on street. We want to be, our sort of influencer is word of mouth. Our credibility source is word of mouth. Our endorsements, celebrity endorsements, are the people who go to the Himalayas. That's our advertising or marketing model. We don't have a marketing team in Royal Enfield anymore. Right? We have riders who want to we have a very clear purpose. We want more people to ride. We are very clear on. Models will come and go. We'll figure out our models. But our purpose is absolutely clear. We want more people to understand the joys of pure motorcycling.
I want to pick up on the point that Rudra was talking about, and this is this tightrope balance between aspiration and accessibility, and that really is a challenge for most brands operating in countries like ours and perhaps other emerging markets, and perhaps now even developed markets, as we actually see economies slow down, even in the most developed markets like the US, for instance. I mean, how do you address this challenge of aspiration married with access?
I think, again, that's very interesting. I think that is a challenge. But the truly great brands, the truly big brands of India, I would argue, do both. So there is a certain degree of aspiration that our consumers have, that our women have who use the products, in Rudy's words, which we underestimate as brand managers.
Okay.
And I think if we have to make big brands great and then keep them growing year after year, those brands must have aspiration built into them, and they can never become big if they don't have access. And just returning to the earlier thing, because I agree with almost everything that's been said, and I think the way I would say it in an empowered world is, when I look at the roster of brands I handle or what our competitors are doing, for a brand to become great in this world, and in India, it's an evolutionary process. People sort of are getting more vocal and they can be heard. A brand has to be very authentic, and a brand has to have a mission that people believe in. So when I look at my thing, I look at a brand like Dove, which has done really well, grown. It's one of the fastest personal care brands in India. But we've just, scratched the tip of the iceberg, because this brand has a power that we never use models in it. We only use real people. We never tell them what to say. They say, and that becomes the ad.
We assume you don't tell them what to say.
No, believe them, we have some draconian rules for that. I don't follow it on my other brands because those are different kinds of brands. Yeah. But we do that for a reason, that one day that will be really, really valuable to the mass of Indian consumers. It still isn't. 99% of the people who use Dove, I don't think today care about that as much. But you look at what's happening in Europe, in the US, that is what the world will go to. And the second thing is the mission. If Dove challenges beauty stereotypes and says, look, because only 10% women think they're beautiful. That's a shocking number. Yeah. Now, Dove has taken that, and Dove took that in the 80s, long before anyone woke up to that particular articulation of it in America. And then Oprah took it up, and so it almost like Dove started a social movement. Yeah. The day we're able to start that in India, then the brand gets even bigger.
That's an important point, and let me ask you this, Manoj, because the point that Samir is making and Rudra made as well. How important is it today in the competitive landscape, in an empowered world, for brands to actually combine passion with mission, take the high moral ground as we were discussing?
Yeah, I think one of the things, if you just look at what brands are, in a way, if you were to define it, they are a trusted bundle of attributes. And today's empowered consumer is actually very much empowered to question you on all the attributes. And the empowerment is to the extent of comparing one attribute of one brand with another attribute of another brand.
Yeah.
So in this situation, you really need to have...
And there'll be some website in the world putting it all out there together for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think during this period, you've got to think about if the brand doesn't have a purpose, if it doesn't have a mission. To me, the purpose and mission is like a North Star. And your development of products and your communication and your engagement with the consumers has to be keeping that North Star in mind. A lot of brands which are going to be successful in this age of empowerment are those brands with those mission. Because you can't have any tactics which is not consistent anymore. You can't have just tactical activities behind a brand. You can't have actually, in fact, if you think about it, in the light of the conversations we're having, probably we don't have to call people brand managers anymore. We'll have to call them as brand stewards.
Okay.
They have to navigate the conversations which are going on. And they need to know what is the reason for existence of a brand. So to me, I think this has become one of those very important things, and the brands which are successful and will be successful will be brands with a purpose.
Ranjit Chari, in a market like India, that costs you brand value, doesn't it? When people turn around and see court cases being fought over not granting licenses, for instance, for a particular drug or so on and so forth.
Well, that is another story by itself, but the fact is, India is a generic market. In fact, even US is the most patent-protected country. 82% of the prescriptions are generics. And we are actually working at the bottom of the pyramid. And thanks to C.K. Prahlad, bless his soul, he gave us this idea.
But is the pharma industry innovating enough to address the pain points of the bottom of the pyramid?
It certainly is, because today, at one end, you have the lowest priced medicine available in the world, less cost than Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. But you also have patented products available, because, as I said, India is two markets in one country. At one end, you have a very rich population who can afford the best in the world. At the other end, you have a population where you need free food, free clothes, and free medicine. So there are solutions for both of these, and they're available. And I think we will work with the multiple stakeholders to make it happen. And as a brand, I agree with you, the pharma industry is needed by everybody, but liked by few. So you've got some work to do there.
Well, David, you've been patiently listening in to what everybody has had to say. So let me ask you this now. What do you see as being the big challenges over the next 5 years? I mean, I'm not even going to talk about the next 15 years, because life is changing practically every 6 months on account of the changes in technology and so on and so forth. But what do you envisage as being the big challenges for brands that we've been talking about, given the change in the customer, the change in technology and so on and so forth?
101 marketing, in a sense, isn't going to change. The consumer is going to dictate the pace of change, and the consumer is changing very quickly. That's the first thing. So being able to spot, identify, course correct your brand ahead of consumer change is going to be the thing that distinguishes the smart marketeers from the ones who are going to start to lose market share. The second is all around technology. Technology has been the major disruptor of a lot of markets, and will be in the future. If you just look and think about the concepts of things like the Internet of Things, the connectivity of objects, of everything in a sense being smart. I think about 0.6% of all products that could be smart in 10 years' time are smart at the moment. And that's going to throw up, again, a huge amount of challenge. And I think the third, and one of the most important, is this whole notion of what is it that consumers are going to buy in the future. And the thing that they're not going to buy in the future is a product. What they're going to buy into is what does the brand say, what does the brand do, how does the brand act, and what is the greater purpose of that brand. And again, I think all marketers are going to have to get much smarter at being able to articulate that in the organisation and pull that through the organisation.
Let me start getting wrap-up comments. Suresh, if I can start by asking you, disrupting existing categories and existing brands to adapt. What is the big challenge there?
Well, I think the big challenge is the challenge of understanding what is happening, and I think the comment that was being made that marketeers and companies need to be proactive in terms of anticipating change. There is always a set belief that this is the way it has worked. Don't change it unless you have to change it. And that's where I look at, for example, in our own case, a crisis as being an opportunity for making those changes that you need to make in order to take things forward.
Okay, Sunil?
See, the world is changing pretty fast. And what you really require is insights. So every brand or every category needs to watch out for these insights. Understand what are the pain points of your brand or of your category. See how you can satisfy it and fulfill that.
WhatsApp before WhatsApp thought of WhatsApp.
Absolutely, it's one of the biggest failures. We were selling SMSs for so many years. We could have adapted and modified if we saw the insights of the customer to a WhatsApp or an equivalent product. We didn't modify the product. We left it as it is, and that's why we are paying for it.
You need to manage your core, keep it aspirational, because the fact is, at the bottom of the pyramid, there is huge opportunity which will remain there for a long time, whether it's in hygiene, whether it's in beauty, whether it's in foods. It's a huge opportunity, and ignoring that would be just stupid. But at the same time, as you disrupt and premiumize categories, you have to take a lot more risk. And I think this thing sometimes that big companies get in of going too slowly and over-testing, and
becoming risk-averse.
And becoming risk-averse usually is sort of the first sign that they'll go down. So I think, but it has to be a mix of the two if you want to sort of sustainably keep winning.
Okay, Vivek?
I think along with adaptability and nimbleness, which you were alluding to, the two other extremely important characteristics are humility and listening. I think brands need to be far more humble, marketers need to be far more humble, and second of all, listen to consumers. If you truly believe that the consumer is going to have the power, then I think all of us have to do a much better job of listening to consumers. If we do these three things right, adaptability, listening, and humility, along with experimentation, I think those will be the winning brands of the future.
And you'll be back in this room next year as well. Arifah.
We should constantly be experimenting. And I think there is no foolproof methodology of protecting brands. We know what's not going to work. You know, when you talk about how to be authentic, how to be perceived as authentic, those are wrong conversations, right? You have to be authentic. In today's day and age, you cannot but be anything else. So I think that it starts with that. But beyond that, for any company to protect against disruption or disrupt themselves, you have to create a culture of experimentation and integrity towards what you observe in those experiments. I think that's really the only way that one can continue to fight the battle for mind share when it comes to today's customers.
Consumers, by definition, sounds transactional to me. And that's something which forces us to think and behave in a certain way versus treating people as real people. And I know that sounds esoteric, but it's a very difficult thing to convert an organization from expecting consumption to having relationships with people. And fundamentally, if I were to just put Royal Enfield into that lens, are we selling motorcycles or are we part of a zeitgeist where the people who wanted to reconnect with themselves, which was a midlife crisis, is now not a midlife crisis anymore. Our average age of our consumer has, in 5 years, it's a remarkable statistic, I couldn't believe it, has moved from 38 to 28 of a buyer. What it means is the zeitgeist is
early on.
Exactly. What it means is that the need to reconnect is what we are part of rather than selling motorcycles.
Today we are actually, as companies who have been very cautious. If you look at a lot of brands, the big brands have actually been built with a lot of care. And today it's very difficult to let those brands let loose. Let consumers participate in brand building. That's right. It's a very, very scary feeling. I mean, if you come to think of it, to let other people who you don't think are qualified to handle, but they're the guys who actually buy your brand, so give them some credit for it. And to be able to be part of those conversations in a smart way, to listen, but very quickly, how do you come back fast? And that's where a lot of things are, it's not only the industry which has to do it, the whole ecosystem around.
Right.
The government, the processes. We have to really design the whole ecosystem to respond faster.
Absolutely.
And it's a bit of learning a new sort of age. And the next 5 years are not going to be the same as the last 5 years. And I can promise you the 5 years after that is going to be even different.
David?
Well, the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands is 10 years this year. And over that 10-year period, 40 brands over that period have exited the top 100, never to be seen in it again. So even over that relatively short period of time, big, powerful, valuable brands are losing some of their efficacy. So things are changing and changing at a fast rate. Big organisations are not very good at killing their own children. But I think they're going to have to be that. They're going to have to be quite ruthless, and they're going to have to start looking and treating and working internally. I think it's very much an internal culture thing. Treating themselves as their own competition to survive, and also working in the same way as a startup company would.
Right.
And I think if you start to have that type of mentality, then I think the future is bright.
Ranjit Shani?
You talk disruption of brands. I think it's not the millennials that you have to worry about. It's the Generation Z, the 13 to 19-year-olds. So catch them young. That's one part. The other part, of course, is brands should also collaborate. Levers is in hygiene. We are in health. We could collaborate easily.
Why haven't you?
Well, Vodafone, we could do e-health with them. Pepsi and Coke, their supply chain.
I asked my question again. Why haven't you?
Supply chain goes right to every village. So I think there are some ideas beyond.
Are we even remotely in the vicinity of competitors now being collaborators? And you're not even competitors in this room.
Precisely.
I mean, some of you are, but a lot of the people that you're trying to reach out to are not your competitors.
Well, we're at separate tables now, but we'll be on the same table soon enough.
Well, hopefully we've helped bridge that gap.
Absolutely. I think that's really where brands can collaborate and reach the consumer better and faster.
Abhijit?
The Indian consumers, if you look at it, it can be divided into two broad groups. The one which is, I agree with Samir partly, that, there is a group where if you give a good quality product, make it available, advertise it well, I think you will win the battle there in that segment. But in the urban centers, it is evolving very fast. It is, changing at a very, very rapid pace, where you need to do things differently, be innovative, and tackle that situation differently. That's what we are trying to do.
Hemant, you get the final say.
I think another aspect of what brands can do is actually build sustainable supply chains. How do you make sure that your product is always consistent? Is your ability to actually go down to the farm and pick up the product from there, and in that process actually create a sustainable supply chain and a sustainable value chain, which actually gives, in a manner of speaking, empowerment to everybody in the supply chain. And therefore, our example of e-Chopal, and today we are the single largest buyer of wheat after SCI in the country.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and insights on what it will take to create brands that have value, that have meaning in an era of empowered consumers or empowered people, as Rudra would like us to say. And I think the crux of the matter, and through all our conversations here this evening, is very, very clear that brands will need to marry passion with purpose. They will need to be adaptable. They will need to innovate, and innovate much faster. And they will need to listen to the consumer in a much more meaningful fashion, not just a transactional way. But once again, appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC-TV18 special. It's been an absolute pleasure. With that, it's time for us to say goodbye to you. From all of us here on the team, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.